Welcome to the world of science fiction, where extraordinary tales and boundless imagination come to life. Enjoy the story and don't forget to subscribe. Dr. Lyra Novak had always dreamed of making first contact with an alien species. As Earth's leading xenobiologist, she had spent years studying theoretical alien biology and preparing for the day humanity would finally meet its cosmic neighbors. However, as she lay on the cold examination table of Starbase Epsilon, she realized that nothing could have truly prepared her for this moment. The blue-skinned alien looming over her was unlike anything she had imagined. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, with 4 arms and a head that resembled a cross between an octopus and a sunflower, the being defied all of Lyra's expectations. Its large, multifaceted eyes blinked in rapid succession as it studied her with what she could only assume was intense curiosity. "Greetings, Earth Dweller," the alien said, its voice a melodious trill that seemed to bypass Lyra's ears and resonate directly in her mind. "I am Zorn, Chief Medical Officer of the Galactic Confederation. Welcome to Starbase Epsilon." Lyra tried to sit up, but a gentle pressure from one of Zorn's 4 hands kept her in place. Thank you," she managed to stammer. "I'm Dr. Lyra Novak, xenobiologist from Earth. It's an honor to meet you." Zorn's head petals rippled in what Lyra hoped was a sign of pleasure. "The honor is ours, Dr. Novak. Your species' first venture beyond your solar system has caused quite a stir in the Confederation. We are most eager to learn about you." As if to emphasize the point, Zorn produced a device that looked like a cross between a stethoscope and a kaleidoscope. "Now, if you'll permit me, I'd like to begin your examination. It's standard procedure for all new species we encounter." Lyra nodded, her scientific curiosity overriding any apprehension she might have felt. "Of course. I'm just as eager to learn about your medical practices. Perhaps we could exchange information." Zorn's head petals rippled again. "A most agreeable suggestion. Let us begin with a basic physiological scan." The alien placed the device against Lyra's chest, and immediately, a holographic display sprang to life above the examination table. Lyra gasped as she saw a 3-dimensional representation of her own body, complete with pulsing organs and flowing blood vessels. "Fascinating," Zorn murmured, manipulating the hologram with 2 of its hands while the other 2 made notes on a separate device. "Your circulatory system is quite efficient, though I'm puzzled by the redundancy of your lungs. Surely one would suffice." Lyra chuckled. "Actually, we need both to function optimally. It's a result of our evolutionary history." Zorn's head petals twitched in what Lyra was beginning to recognize as surprise. "How inefficient. But I suppose that's to be expected from a young species. Now, let's examine your reproductive system." Before Lyra could protest, Zorn had adjusted the hologram to focus on her lower abdomen. The alien's multifaceted eyes widened, and all 4 of its hands froze in mid-motion. "Dr. Novak," Zorn said, its mental voice tinged with confusion, "I don't mean to alarm you, but it appears you have a rather large parasite attached to your lower body." Lyra blinked, momentarily baffled. Then, as realization dawned, she felt a blush creep up her cheeks. That's not a parasite, Zorn. It's a part of my anatomy. A reproductive organ, actually." Zorn's head petals flared out in all directions, a gesture Lyra interpreted as extreme surprise or possibly alarm. "But it's so exposed and vulnerable. Surely your species didn't evolve such a precarious arrangement." Lyra couldn't help but laugh, despite her embarrassment. "I assure you, it's perfectly normal for humans. In fact, roughly half of our population has this particular configuration." Zorn's mental voice took on a tone of fascination mixed with horror. "How extraordinarily impractical. And you say this is an organ used for reproduction? How does it function without causing grievous harm?" As Lyra launched into an impromptu lecture on human reproductive biology, she couldn't help but marvel at the absurdity of the situation. Here she was, light years from Earth, explaining the birds and the bees to a blue-skinned alien with a flower for a head. It was hardly the dignified first contact she had envisioned, but she had to admit it was far more interesting. Zorn listened with rapt attention, occasionally interrupting with questions that ranged from insightful to borderline inappropriate. Lyra answered as best she could, reminding herself that this was a unique opportunity for cultural exchange, no matter how awkward it might be. Remarkable, Zorn said when Lyra had finished her explanation. Your species' method of reproduction is far more involved than most we've encountered. It's a wonder you've managed to propagate at all. Lyra smiled wryly. We manage well enough. Now, if you don't mind, I'd love to learn about your species' biology. Fair is fair, after all. Zorn's head petals rippled in what Lyra now recognized as amusement. Of course, Dr. Novak. Though I warn you, our methods may seem quite alien to you. As Zorn began to explain the intricacies of its species' reproductive cycle, a process that involved spore dispersal, telepathic bonding, and something called quantum entanglement pollination, Lyra found herself scribbling furious notes on a datapad. This was the kind of information xenobiologists back on Earth would kill for. Hours passed as Lyra and Zorn exchanged biological and cultural information. Despite the initial awkwardness, Lyra found herself warming to the alien doctor. Zorn's curiosity matched her own, and its willingness to share knowledge was refreshing. As their impromptu cultural exchange wound down, Zorn's head petals suddenly stiffened. Oh my, it said, its mental voice tinged with embarrassment. I've just realized we've spent the entire day on this examination. The Confederation Council will be expecting my report on humanity's first representative. Lyra sat up, stretching muscles that had grown stiff from lying on the examination table. What will you tell them? Zorn was quiet for a moment, its multifaceted eyes blinking in rapid succession. Finally, it spoke. I will tell them that humans are a fascinating species, full of contradictions and surprises. Your biology may be inefficient by our standards, but your adaptability and curiosity are unparalleled. I believe you will make fine additions to the Galactic Confederation. Warmth bloomed in Lyra's chest at the alien's words. Thank you, Zorn. I look forward to learning more about your people and the other species in the Confederation. As Lyra prepared to leave the examination room, Zorn stopped her with a gentle touch of one of its hands. Dr. Novak, I have one last question, if you'll indulge me. Of course, Lyra said, curious. Zorn's head petals rippled in what she now recognized as embarrassment. This reproductive organ of yours. Is it true that humans sometimes use it for purposes other than reproduction? For pleasure. Lyra felt her face flush again, but she managed to keep her composure. Yes, that's correct. It's an important aspect of human intimacy and bonding. Zorn's mental voice was filled with wonder. Extraordinary. Your species continues to amaze me, Dr. Novak. I look forward to many more fascinating discussions in the future. As Lyra left the examination room, she couldn't help but smile. First contact had been nothing like she'd expected, but it had been illuminating in ways she never could have imagined. She had a feeling that humanity's adventures in the Galactic Confederation were only just beginning, and she couldn't wait to see what other surprises the universe had in store. Ren's gaze lingered, her brow furrowing in confusion as she saw something that caught her off guard. Brandon shifted uncomfortably on the examination table, misinterpreting her expression. Is everything all right, Zorn? He asked, trying to cover his exposed body with the thin gown. Zorn blinked, her multifaceted eyes focusing back on his face. Yes, everything is in order. It's just. I'm detecting unusual energy fluctuations emanating from that particular region. Brandon's eyes widened in alarm. Energy fluctuations? Is that bad? Zorn's head petals rippled. I'm not certain. It could be a normal physiological function, but it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. Perhaps it's related to your species' reproductive capabilities. Lyra groaned inwardly. Of course, the conversation was going to come back to that. It's probably nothing to worry about, Zorn. Just focus on the blood samples, okay? Zorn tilted her head flower, clearly unconvinced. If you insist, Dr. Novak. But I must admit, my curiosity is piqued. Perhaps after we've addressed the immediate crisis, we could explore this further. Lyra decided to ignore that suggestion. Let's just stick to the crisis for now, shall we? Zorn sighed, but turned her attention back to the task at hand. Very well. Now, according to these scans, your blood contains several unique antibodies that are not present in any other species in the Confederation. This could be the key to developing an antidote to the virus. So, what do we do? Lyra asked, trying to sound more confident than she felt. We need to isolate those antibodies and synthesize a compound that can neutralize the pathogen, Zorn explained, her 4 hands moving swiftly across the console. It's a complex process, but I believe we can accomplish it with the resources available here. As Zorn worked, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. She was a xenobiologist, not a virologist or a biochemist. She didn't have the skills necessary to contribute to the antidote's creation. Is there anything I can do to help? She asked, feeling useless. Zorn glanced at her, her multifaceted eyes softening slightly. Actually, there is one thing. I need a control sample to compare your antibodies against. A sample from someone who hasn't been exposed to the virus. I can do that, Lyra said, relieved to have a task to perform. Where do I find someone like that? Zorn paused, her head petals twitching. That may be difficult. Given the rapid spread of the virus, it's unlikely that anyone on this station is still uninfected. Lyra's heart sank. So, what do we do? Zorn was silent for a moment, her multifaceted eyes gazing off into the distance. There is one possibility, though it's a long shot. I'm listening, Lyra said, her hope rekindled. There's a small research vessel docked in the station's bay, Zorn explained. It's equipped with a stasis pod designed to preserve biological samples for extended periods. If we're lucky, there might be someone on board who was placed in stasis before the outbreak began. That's a great idea. Lyra exclaimed. Let's go check it out. Zorn nodded. It's our best chance. But be warned, the bay is likely to be heavily contaminated. We'll need to wear protective suits. A few minutes later, Lyra and Zorn were suited up in bulky, biohazard suits, making their way through the station's corridors towards the docking bay. The once bustling hallways were now eerily deserted, save for the occasional figure clad in a similar suit, hurrying in the opposite direction. As they approached the bay, they could hear the sounds of chaos, alarms blaring, shouts echoing, and the distant rumble of machinery. When they reached the entrance, they were met with a scene of pandemonium. Technicians in biohazard suits were running frantically, trying to seal off sections of the bay. Medical teams were tending to fallen colleagues, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. And in the midst of it all, a group of security officers were engaged in a firefight with what appeared to be infected crew members. What's going on here? Lyra shouted over the din. One of the security officers turned to her, his face grim. The virus is mutating, Doctor. It's turning people into violent monsters. Lyra's heart sank. This was even worse than she had imagined. We need to get to that research vessel, she said to Zorn. Zorn nodded, her head petals twitching nervously. Stay close, Dr. Novak. This could get dangerous. As they made their way through the bay, dodging laser fire and avoiding the infected, Lyra couldn't help but marvel at Zorn's bravery. Despite her alien appearance and unfamiliarity with human combat, the doctor moved with a surprising agility, using her 4 arms to deflect attacks and clear a path through the chaos. Finally, they reached the research vessel, a small, unassuming craft tucked away in a corner of the bay. Zorn quickly accessed the vessel's control panel and began cycling through the internal systems. "I've located the stasis pod," she announced. "It's in the medical bay. Let's go." The medical bay was small and cramped, filled with strange-looking equipment and blinking lights. In the center of the room, a large, transparent pod hummed softly, its interior filled with a swirling mist. "There it is," Lyra said, pointing to the pod. "Let's see who's inside." Zorn activated the pod scanner, and a holographic image appeared above the console. Lyra gasped as she saw the person inside, a young woman, no older than herself, with long, flowing hair and a serene expression on her face. "She's beautiful," Lyra murmured. "Who is she?" Zorn consulted the vessel's logs. "Her name is Alina, a botanist specializing in rare plant species. She was placed in stasis 5 years ago, due to a terminal illness. It appears she was hoping for a cure to be discovered in the future." Lyra felt a pang of sympathy for the woman. To be frozen in time, waiting for a miracle, only to wake up to a nightmare. "We have to wake her up," she said. "She's our only hope." Zorn hesitated. "Are you sure, Dr. Novak? Waking someone from stasis is a risky procedure. And given the current situation, it could be even more dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Lyra insisted. "If we want to stop this virus, we need her antibodies. We have to take the chance." Zorn sighed, but nodded in agreement. "Very well. I'll initiate the revival sequence. But be prepared for anything." As Zorn activated the pod, the swirling mist inside began to dissipate, revealing Alina's face more clearly. Lyra held her breath, waiting anxiously for the woman to wake up. Suddenly, Alina's eyes fluttered open. She gasped, her body convulsing as she struggled to adjust to her surroundings. "Where am I?" she stammered, her voice weak and disoriented. "What's going on?" Lyra stepped forward, trying to reassure her. "You're safe now, Alina. You're on Starbase Epsilon. There's been an outbreak of a dangerous virus, and we need your help." Alina looked at her, confusion clouding her eyes. "A virus? What are you talking about? What year is it?" "It's the year 2342, Lyra explained. "You've been in stasis for 5 years." Alina's eyes widened in shock. 5 years? But my illness." "We know," Lyra said gently. "We need your help to find a cure for this virus. Your body may have antibodies that can save us all." Alina was silent for a moment, taking in the information. Then, she nodded, her expression hardening with determination. "All right," she said. "I'll do whatever I can to help." As Alina emerged from the pod, shaky but determined, Lyra felt a surge of hope. With Alina's unique biology and Zorn's medical expertise, they might just have a chance of stopping this virus after all. But just as she began to feel optimistic, a loud crash echoed through the bay. The research vessel shuddered violently, and alarms began blaring once more. "What was that?" Lyra exclaimed, her heart pounding. Zorn consulted the vessel's sensors. "We've been boarded," she announced. "Infected crew members are breaking into the medical bay." Lyra's eyes widened in horror. They were trapped. Surrounded by a deadly virus and a horde of infected monsters. Their only hope was to fight their way out. "Get ready," she said to Zorn and Alina, grabbing a discarded laser pistol from the floor. "This is going to get ugly." And as the door to the medical bay burst open, revealing a horde of snarling, bloodshot-eyed figures, Lyra knew that she was right. This was going to be the fight of their lives. The medical bay doors hissed open, revealing a grotesque sight. 3 figures, once human crew members, now twisted and contorted by the virus, stood snarling in the doorway. Their eyes glowed with a malevolent red light, and their bodies were covered in grotesque pustules and lesions. "Stay behind me," Lyra said, raising her laser pistol. Zorn, can you handle a weapon? Zorn nodded, extending 2 of her 4 arms. I am proficient in several forms of combat. Though I prefer diplomacy, I am not afraid to defend myself. Alina, still disoriented from her long stasis, looked pale and frightened. I don't know how to fight, she stammered. Just stay out of the way, Lyra said, her voice grim. We'll protect you. The infected figures lunged forward, their claws extended, their mouths open in silent screams. Lyra fired her laser pistol, hitting one of the creatures in the chest. The figure staggered back, but quickly recovered and charged again. Zorn moved with surprising speed, using her 4 arms to block the infected's attacks. She grabbed one of the creatures by the neck and slammed it against the wall, knocking it unconscious. Lyra continued to fire, taking down another of the infected. But the third one managed to get past her defenses and lunged at Alina. No! Lyra shouted, diving in front of Alina. The infected's claws raked across her back, tearing through her biohazard suit. Lyra cried out in pain, but managed to push the infected away. Zorn quickly subdued the creature, pinning it to the ground with her superior strength. Are you alright, Dr. Novak? Zorn asked, her voice filled with concern. Lyra winced, clutching her back. I'll be fine. Just a scratch. But she knew it was more than that. The infected's claws had broken through her suit, exposing her to the virus. We need to get out of here, Alina said, her eyes wide with fear. This place is too dangerous. Lyra nodded. Zorn, can you clear a path to the docking bay? We need to find a way off this station. Zorn nodded. I'll do my best. But the situation is deteriorating rapidly. The entire station is being overrun. As they made their way back through the docking bay, the chaos had intensified. The firefight between the security officers and the infected had escalated, and explosions rocked the station. This is madness, Lyra shouted over the din, we need to find a ship and get out of here before it's too late. Zorn pointed to a small transport ship docked at the far end of the bay. That's our best bet. It's a Confederation patrol vessel. It should be equipped with weapons and a warp drive. They ran towards the ship, dodging laser fire and avoiding the infected. As they reached the boarding ramp, a group of infected crew members blocked their path. I'll hold them off, Zorn said, drawing a strange-looking energy weapon from her belt. You two get on board and prepare for launch. Lyra hesitated. Are you sure you can handle them? Zorn nodded, her multifaceted eyes filled with determination. I am a doctor, Dr. Novak. But I am also a warrior. Go. I'll be right behind you. Lyra and Alina raced up the boarding ramp and into the ship. Lyra quickly took the pilot's seat and began powering up the systems. Hurry! Alina shouted, looking back at the docking bay. They're gaining on her. Lyra glanced at the monitors and saw Zorn fighting bravely against the horde of infected. The alien doctor was holding her own, but she was clearly outnumbered. I can't leave her, Lyra said, her voice filled with anguish. She's risking her life for us. We don't have a choice, Alina said, grabbing Lyra's arm. If we stay here, we'll all die. We have to go. Lyra hesitated for another moment, torn between her loyalty to Zorn and her duty to survive. Finally, she made her decision. Engaging launch sequence, she announced, activating the ship's engines. The ship shuddered violently as it detached from the docking bay. Lyra steered the vessel out of the station, narrowly avoiding a collision with a damaged transport ship. As they left Starbase Epsilon behind, Lyra looked back at the station, her heart filled with sorrow. She had no idea what had happened to Zorn, but she feared the worst. She's gone, Alina said softly, placing a hand on Lyra's shoulder. There was nothing we could do. Lyra nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. But I'll never forget her sacrifice. As they soared through space, leaving the infected starbase Epsilon behind, Lyra couldn't help but feel a sense of despair. They had escaped the immediate danger, but they were still infected with the virus. And they were no closer to finding a cure. What do we do now? Alina asked, her voice filled with uncertainty. Lyra took a deep breath, trying to regain her composure. We head to the nearest Confederation outpost and report what happened. Maybe they can help us find a cure. Alina nodded, her expression hardening with determination. All right. Let's do it. As Lyra set a course for the nearest Confederation outpost, she couldn't shake the feeling that their troubles were far from over. The virus was still inside them, slowly taking hold of their bodies. And they had no idea what awaited them at the next outpost. But as she looked at Alina, her fellow survivor, she felt a surge of resolve. They had come this far, and they weren't going to give up. They would fight this virus with everything they had. And they would find a cure, no matter the cost. As the transport ship hurtled through the vast expanse of space, Lyra couldn't help but think of Zorn. The alien doctor had been a true hero, sacrificing herself to save them. And Lyra knew that she had to honor Zorn's memory by continuing the fight. She glanced at Alina, and saw the same determination reflected in her eyes. They were two unlikely allies, bound together by a shared tragedy and a common goal. And together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The Confederation outpost was a small, isolated station located on the edge of known space. As Lyra approached the station, she hailed the communications officer and requested permission to dock. "This is Transport Vessel Echo 7 requesting permission to dock," she said, her voice strained. "We have a medical emergency on board." The communications officer's voice was curt and businesslike. "Identify yourself and state the nature of your emergency." "This is Dr. Lyra Novak, xenobiologist from Earth," Lyra replied. "We are survivors of the outbreak on Starbase Epsilon. We are infected with the virus and need immediate medical assistance." There was a long pause, and then the communications officer spoke again, his voice filled with suspicion. "Starbase Epsilon. That station has been declared a biohazard zone. No vessels are permitted to approach. You will be turned away." Lyra's heart sank. "But we need help," she pleaded. "We're infected. If you don't let us dock, we'll die." "I'm sorry, Doctor," the communications officer said, his voice cold and unyielding. "But I cannot risk the safety of this station. You will be turned away. Do not approach." And with that, the communications channel went dead. Lyra stared at the control panel in disbelief. They were being abandoned. Left to die in the cold vacuum of space. "What do we do now?" Alina asked, her voice filled with despair. Lyra didn't answer. She was too numb with shock and disappointment. They had come so far, only to be turned away at the last minute. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently, throwing Lyra and Alina against the bulkhead. Alarms blared, and the lights flickered ominously. "What's happening?" Alina cried, clutching her head. Lyra struggled to regain control of the ship. "We're being scanned," she said, her voice strained. "They're trying to determine if we're carrying any weapons or contraband." As the scans intensified, Lyra felt a sharp pain in her head. She gasped, clutching her temples. "They're inside my head," she whispered. "They're reading my thoughts." Alina looked at her in horror. "What are they seeing?" Lyra closed her eyes, trying to block out the intrusive thoughts. "They know about the virus," she said. "They know we're infected. They're going to destroy us." And as she spoke, a blinding light filled the cockpit. The ship exploded in a ball of fire, incinerating Lyra and Alina in an instant. Starbase Epsilon, once a symbol of hope and progress, was now a tomb. And Lyra and Alina, two brave women who had fought against all odds, were now just another statistic. But as their ship disintegrated, a small data chip containing their research on the virus was ejected from the wreckage. The chip floated through space, carrying with it the hope that one day, someone would find a cure for this deadly plague. And somewhere, in the vast expanse of the galaxy, Zorn was still alive, fighting to survive against the infected. The alien doctor had managed to escape the medical bay before the horde of infected had overwhelmed her. And she was determined to find a way to stop the virus, no matter the cost. The crisis on Starbase Epsilon was far from over. And the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Brandon shifted uncomfortably on the examination table, misinterpreting her expression. "Is everything all right, Ren?" he asked, trying to cover his exposed body with the thin gown. Ren blinked, her luminous eyes focusing back on his face. Yes, everything is in order. It's just, I'm detecting unusual energy fluctuations emanating from that particular region." Brandon's eyes widened in alarm. Energy fluctuations? Is that bad? Ren's dark hair cascaded down her back as her head tilted slightly. "I'm not certain. It could be a normal physiological function, but it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. Perhaps it's related to your species' reproductive capabilities." Brandon groaned inwardly. Of course, the conversation was going to come back to that. "It's probably nothing to worry about, Ren. Just focus on the blood samples, okay?" Ren's lips twitched, clearly unconvinced. "If you insist, Brandon. But I must admit, my curiosity is piqued. Perhaps after we've addressed the immediate crisis, we could explore this further." Brandon decided to ignore that suggestion. "Let's just stick to the crisis for now, shall we?" Ren sighed, but turned her attention back to the task at hand. "Very well. Now, according to these scans, your blood contains several unique antibodies that are not present in any other species in this sector. This could be the key to developing an antidote to the virus." "So, what do we do?" Brandon asked, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "We need to isolate those antibodies and synthesize a compound that can neutralize the pathogen," Ren explained, her fingers moving swiftly across the console. "It's a complex process, but I believe we can accomplish it with the resources available here." As Ren worked, Brandon couldn't help but feel a sense of helplessness. He was just a regular guy, not a scientist or a doctor. He didn't have the skills necessary to contribute to the antidote's creation. "Is there anything I can do to help?" he asked, feeling useless. Ren glanced at him, her luminous eyes softening slightly. "Actually, there is one thing. I need a control sample to compare your antibodies against. A sample from someone who hasn't been exposed to the virus." "I can do that," Brandon said, relieved to have a task to perform. "Where do I find someone like that?" Ren paused, her brow furrowing. "That may be difficult. Given the rapid spread of the virus, it's unlikely that anyone on this station is still uninfected." Brandon's heart sank. "So, what do we do?" Ren was silent for a moment, her luminous eyes gazing off into the distance. "There is one possibility, though it's a long shot." "I'm listening," Brandon said, his hope rekindled. "There's a small research lab on level 12, Ren explained. They have a secure cryo-storage unit designed to preserve biological samples for extended periods. If we're lucky, there might be someone on file who was placed in cryosleep before the outbreak began." "That's a great idea," Brandon exclaimed. "Let's go check it out." Ren nodded. "It's our best chance. But be warned, level 12 is likely to be heavily contaminated. We'll need to proceed with caution." A few minutes later, Brandon and Ren were armed with laser pistols and made their way through the station's corridors towards level 12. The once bustling hallways were now eerily deserted, save for the occasional figure clad in a biohazard suit, hurrying in the opposite direction. As they approached the elevator leading to level 12, they could hear the sounds of chaos, alarms blaring, shouts echoing, and the distant rumble of explosions. When the elevator doors opened, they were met with a scene of pandemonium. Technicians in biohazard suits were running frantically, trying to contain the spread of the virus. Medical teams were tending to fallen colleagues, their faces etched with fear and exhaustion. And in the midst of it all, a group of security officers were engaged in a firefight with what appeared to be infected crew members. "What's going on here?" Brandon shouted over the din. One of the security officers turned to him, his face grim. "The virus is mutating, Doctor. It's turning people into violent monsters." Brandon's heart sank. This was even worse than he had imagined. "We need to get to that cryo-storage unit," he said to Ren. Ren nodded, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "Stay close, Brandon. This could get dangerous." As they made their way through level 12, dodging laser fire and avoiding the infected, Brandon couldn't help but marvel at Ren's bravery. Despite the chaos and danger, she remained focused on their mission, her hand steady on her laser pistol. Finally, they reached the research lab, a small, unassuming room tucked away in a corner of level 12. Ren quickly accessed the lab's control panel and began cycling through the internal systems. "I've located the cryo-storage unit," she announced. "It's in the main lab. Let's go." The main lab was filled with strange-looking equipment and blinking lights. In the center of the room, a large, transparent cylinder hummed softly, its interior filled with a swirling mist. "There it is," Brandon said, pointing to the cylinder. "Let's see who's inside." Ren activated the cylinder's scanner, and a holographic image appeared above the console. Brandon gasped as he saw the person inside, a young man, no older than himself, with short, cropped hair and a determined expression on his face. "He looks familiar," Brandon murmured. "Who is he?" Ren consulted the lab's logs. "His name is Jackson, a security officer who was severely injured during a training exercise. He was placed in cryosleep 6 months ago, hoping for a full recovery." Brandon felt a pang of sympathy for the man. To be frozen in time, waiting for a miracle, only to wake up to a nightmare. "We have to wake him up," he said. "He's our only hope." Ren hesitated. "Are you sure, Brandon? Waking someone from cryosleep is a risky procedure. And given the current situation, it could be even more dangerous." "We don't have a choice," Brandon insisted. "If we want to stop this virus, we need his antibodies. We have to take the chance." Ren sighed, but nodded in agreement. "Very well. I'll initiate the revival sequence. But be prepared for anything." As Ren activated the cylinder, the swirling mist inside began to dissipate, revealing Jackson's face more clearly. Brandon held his breath, waiting anxiously for the man to wake up. Suddenly, Jackson's eyes fluttered open. He gasped, his body convulsing as he struggled to adjust to his surroundings. "Where am I?" he stammered, his voice weak and disoriented. "What's going on?" Brandon stepped forward, trying to reassure him. "You're safe now, Jackson. You're on Outpost Zeta 9. There's been an outbreak of a dangerous virus, and we need your help." Jackson looked at him, confusion clouding his eyes. "A virus? What are you talking about? What year is it?" "It's the year 2342, Brandon explained. "You've been in cryosleep for 6 months." Jackson's eyes widened in shock. 6 months? But my injuries." "We know," Brandon said gently. "We need your help to find a cure for this virus. Your body may have antibodies that can save us all." Jackson was silent for a moment, taking in the information. Then, he nodded, his expression hardening with determination. "All right," he said. "I'll do whatever I can to help." As Jackson emerged from the cylinder, shaky but determined, Brandon felt a surge of hope. With Jackson's healthy immune system and Ren's medical expertise, they might just have a chance of stopping this virus after all. But just as he began to feel optimistic, a loud crash echoed through the lab. The doors slammed open, revealing a horde of infected crew members, their eyes glowing with a malevolent red light. "We've got company," Jackson said, grabbing a discarded laser rifle from the floor. "Looks like we're going to have to fight our way out of here." Brandon nodded, his heart pounding. They were trapped. Surrounded by a deadly virus and a horde of infected monsters. Their only hope was to fight together, as an unlikely alliance, and find a way to survive. "Get ready," he said to Ren and Jackson, raising his laser pistol. "This is going to be a long night." And as the infected figures lunged forward, Brandon knew that he was right. This was going to be the fight of their lives. They held their ground, firing their weapons with precision and skill. The infected fell one by one, their grotesque bodies collapsing to the floor. But there were too many of them. They kept coming, wave after wave, their relentless hunger for flesh driving them forward. Ren moved with surprising agility, dodging attacks and taking down infected with well-aimed shots. Jackson, despite his weakened state, fought like a seasoned warrior, his laser rifle spitting out bolts of energy that incinerated the infected in their tracks. Brandon fought alongside them, his heart pounding in his chest, his hands shaking with adrenaline. He had never been in a real fight before, but he knew that he had to protect Ren and Jackson. They were his only hope, and he was theirs. As the battle raged on, Brandon noticed that the infected seemed to be getting stronger, more resilient. They were adapting to their attacks, learning how to avoid their weapons. "They're evolving," he shouted to Ren. "The virus is making them stronger." Ren nodded, her face grim. "We need to find a way to stop them, and fast." Suddenly, Jackson cried out in pain. Brandon turned to see that an infected had managed to get past his defenses and had slashed him across the arm. "Jackson!" Brandon shouted, rushing to his side. "Are you all right?" Jackson gritted his teeth, trying to ignore the pain. "I'm fine," he said. "Just a scratch." But Brandon could see that the wound was deep and that Jackson was starting to weaken. The virus was already taking hold of his body. "We need to get him out of here," Brandon said to Ren. "He's not going to last much longer." Ren nodded. "I have an idea. There's a secure medical bay on level 8. It's equipped with advanced medical equipment and a reinforced door. We can take Jackson there and try to stabilize him." "All right," Brandon said. "Let's go." With Ren leading the way, they fought their way out of the lab and made their way towards the elevator leading to level 8. But as they reached the elevator doors, they were confronted by a massive horde of infected, blocking their path. "We're trapped," Jackson said, his voice weak. "There's no way we can get through them." Brandon looked at Ren, his eyes filled with despair. They had come so far, but it seemed like their journey was about to end. But Ren refused to give up. She took a deep breath, her eyes hardening with determination. "There's always a way," she said. "We just have to find it." And with that, she charged forward, her laser pistol blazing, her voice ringing out in the chaos, "For humanity. For Outpost Zeta 9. For a future worth fighting for." Brandon and Jackson followed her, their hearts filled with a renewed sense of hope. They were an unlikely alliance, bound together by a shared goal and a common enemy. And together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. They would fight for their survival, for their future, and for the hope that one day, they would find a cure for this deadly virus. They would fight until their last breath. Ren's gaze lingered, her brow furrowing in confusion as she saw something that caught her off guard. Brandon shifted uncomfortably on the examination table, misinterpreting her expression. "Is everything all right, Ren?" he asked, trying to cover his exposed body with the thin gown. Ren blinked, her luminous eyes focusing back on his face. Yes, everything is in order. It's just. I'm detecting unusual energy fluctuations emanating from that particular region." Brandon's eyes widened in alarm. Energy fluctuations. Is that bad? Ren's dark hair cascaded down her back as her head tilted slightly. I'm not certain. It could be a normal physiological function, but it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. Perhaps it's related to your species' reproductive capabilities. Brandon groaned inwardly. Of course, the conversation was going to come back to that. It's probably nothing to worry about, Ren. Just focus on the virus, okay? Ren's lips twitched, clearly unconvinced. If you insist, Brandon. But I must admit, my curiosity is piqued. Perhaps after we've addressed the immediate crisis, we could explore this further. Brandon decided to ignore that suggestion. Let's just stick to the crisis for now, shall we? Ren sighed, but turned her attention back to the task at hand. Very well. I've dispatched the drones to collect samples. It will take a few minutes for them to return. In the meantime, I want to analyze your neural patterns. There's something unique about your brain activity. As Ren continued her scans, Brandon tried to distract himself by focusing on the events unfolding outside the lab. The alarms were still blaring, and the station was shaking with explosions. He could hear the sounds of gunfire and the screams of the infected. How bad is it out there? He asked, his voice filled with concern. Ren's face was grim. The virus is spreading rapidly. We've lost contact with several sectors of the station. It's only a matter of time before it reaches us. Brandon felt a surge of guilt. He was the one who had warned them about the virus, but he hadn't been able to prevent it from spreading. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I should have done more. Ren looked at him, her luminous eyes softening slightly. Don't blame yourself, Brandon. You did everything you could. And thanks to you, we have a chance to fight back. As she spoke, the drones returned, carrying samples of the virus. Ren quickly analyzed the samples, her fingers flying over the console. It's even worse than I thought, she announced, her face paling. The virus is mutating at an accelerated rate. It's adapting to our defenses. Brandon's heart sank. So, what do we do? Ren was silent for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. We need to find a way to stop the mutation. And I think I know how. She turned to Brandon, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and determination. Your DNA. It's the key. Your cells have a unique ability to resist the virus. If we can isolate that ability and replicate it, we can create an antidote. But how? Brandon asked, his mind racing. We need to combine your DNA with a compatible alien species, Ren explained. A species that shares some of your biological traits but has a different immune system. And where are we going to find a species like that? Brandon asked, his voice filled with doubt. Ren smiled. We already have one. Me. Brandon stared at her in disbelief. You're saying you want to combine our DNA? Ren nodded. It's the only way. It's risky, but it's our best chance. Brandon hesitated. He had only known Ren for a few hours, but he trusted her. He knew that she was willing to do whatever it took to save the station. All right, he said, his voice firm. Let's do it. Ren smiled, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Good. I'll prepare the equipment. As Ren prepared for the procedure, Brandon couldn't help but feel a sense of nervousness. He was about to undergo a radical experiment that could change his life forever. But he knew that he had to do it. He couldn't let the virus destroy the station and everyone on board. He had to fight for his survival and for the future of humanity. As Ren approached him with a syringe filled with a glowing green liquid, Brandon took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Ready? Ren asked, her voice soft. Ready, Brandon replied. Ren injected the liquid into his arm, and a surge of energy coursed through his body. He gasped, his muscles tensing. "It's working," Ren said, her voice filled with excitement. "Your DNA is merging with mine. The virus is starting to weaken." As the process continued, Brandon felt a strange sensation. He could feel his mind merging with Ren's, their thoughts and emotions intertwining. He saw her memories, her dreams, her fears. He felt her passion for science, her love for her people, her desire to protect the galaxy. And she saw his. She saw his childhood, his family, his friends. She felt his longing for home, his fear of death, his hope for a better future. As their minds merged, they realized that they were more alike than they had ever imagined. They were both driven by a desire to make a difference in the world. They were both willing to sacrifice everything for the greater good. And they were both falling in love. As the procedure neared its end, the alarms suddenly stopped blaring. The shaking subsided, and the gunfire faded away. The virus was gone. Ren pulled away from Brandon, her eyes filled with tears. "We did it," she whispered. "We saved the station." Brandon smiled, his heart filled with joy. "We did it together," he said. As they looked at each other, they knew that their lives had changed forever. They were no longer just scientists or strangers. They were something more. They were partners. Soulmates. Lovers. And they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. In the days that followed, Ren and Brandon worked tirelessly to distribute the antidote to the rest of the station. They saved countless lives and restored order to the chaos. As the station began to recover, Ren and Brandon found time to explore their feelings for each other. They went on dates, they shared stories, and they made love. They learned about each other's cultures, each other's beliefs, and each other's dreams. They discovered that they were meant to be together. And they knew that their love could bridge the gap between their two worlds. As time went on, Ren and Brandon became heroes to the people of Outpost Zeta 9. They were celebrated for their bravery, their intelligence, and their compassion. They were seen as a symbol of hope for the future. A future where humans and aliens could live together in peace and harmony. And as they looked out at the stars, they knew that their journey was just beginning. They had saved the station, but there were still countless challenges to overcome in the galaxy. But they were ready. They had each other. And they had a new understanding. A new understanding of love, of hope, and of the power of unity. And as they held each other close, they knew that they could face anything, as long as they were together. The end.